Hello? Am I coming through? Okay.
Let's go.
We would like to get started, so please come in and have a seat. You folks can go ahead and have a seat, and it doesn't matter which order. Will everyone move on into the sanctuary who's attending the meeting and have a seat so we can get started? All right, let's begin with a word of prayer. God, we know that you, through the life and teachings of Jesus, are the source of the knowledge, the wisdom, and the insight we need to guide our lives. We are grateful for the role EMS has played in the faith formation of many of our children and youth. We welcome this time today to become more informed about Christian education at EMS and our congregational partnership with the school. We ask you to guide our dialogue and our understanding. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for staying today, and look forward to a lively conversation with our panel. Just by way of background, Parkview has had a long-standing partnership with EMS, and many of our children and youth have attended, maybe some of you have attended EMS. And we, as a congregation, currently have a growing number of families with children and youth who wish to attend EMHS. And historically, we as partners financially have provided educational grants that have been 50% or greater, and historically it's been greater, of discounted tuition that EMHS offers us. Back in January, we had a congregational meeting when the council and the finance committee explained in quite a bit of detail how our conversation for the past 2 or 3 years led us to the realization, the understanding that we would need to somewhat reduce the amount of the educational grants we can offer, at least for the next 4 years or so. And at that meeting, several questions were raised, and I think maybe Joe Lapp asked, how much do we as a congregation value the Christian Anabaptist education that EMHS offers? And we also talked about how does education at EMHS help students in their search for spiritual meaning and Christian faith. So following that meeting, the council had more dialogue, and we felt it would be helpful to become better informed about what is happening today at EMHS and EMS, and how faith formation is happening for our children and youth. And we thought it would be helpful perhaps to invite a panel of persons who represent the school to join with us today and to have dialogue with them about this. And we also invited each of you to send any questions you might have to us. And we have shared the questions that the council generated as well as the questions that came from you. I have shared those with our panel, and that will be our focus of discussion for today. So I am aware there are a number of questions, And I have absolutely no idea how much dialogue we'll have or how long this will take. So I'll do my best to kind of keep the conversation moving and not to shortchange the later questions, which are some of the most important. And we'll see what arises here today. So I will read each question or closely related cluster of questions, and then we'll give the panel a chance to respond. And once they have given some input, we'll open it up to the congregation. And we have a couple of roving mics here, and Don and Rita will bring those around. And then following response from you, we'll move on to the next question or set of closely related questions. And at the end, we will have a blessing for our EMHS folks and conclude the meeting. And I really am aiming to finish our meeting by noon or before if possible. I also did want to mention, because we probably won't have time today to discuss the curriculum at EMS in detail, that we included in Friday's email links to the EMS and EMHS faith practices, their philosophy of faith formation, and the Bible curriculum for grade 9. And those are wonderfully informative, developed documents that I really enjoyed looking through and reading. And I would encourage you, if you have information, if you have interest in how Anabaptist education is happening at EMHS, please read those. All right, I'll ask the first question, and I'll ask Paul Lehman as head of school to start, but let me first introduce our panel. And let me see if I can do this in the right order. So farthest from me is Justin King, who is principal at EMHS. Shannon Dyson, who is a member of the board and also is vice president for student affairs at EMU. Paul Lehman, who is head of school at EMS. Miriam Rhodes, who is a relatively recent alumnus of EMHS and also attends Parkview. Amy Mumbauer, who, am I pronouncing that correctly, who is chair of the board at EMS. And Ben Bixler, who is a teacher and also attends our congregation. So a warm welcome to each of you, and thank you so much for sharing your time and energy to come and have conversation with us today. We really value that. All right, the very first set of really, I think, closely related questions I will ask is, the Eastern Mennonite School mission statement says that EMS, quotes, joins home and church in calling students to faith in Jesus Christ, academic excellence, personal integrity, and compassionate service in the world, end quote. Please talk more about the relationship between home and church and EMS, your partnership with congregations to fulfill your mission. And in addition to providing financial grants for students, what are ways our congregation might partner with EMS? A member of the congregation wrote, I recommend that the panel mention that EMS provides partial scholarships for middle school students from Parkview and other partner congregations. My understanding is that the scholarships are offered to students who would meet their congregation's requirements for the grade 9 to 12 educational grants. As far as I know, this was not mentioned in our earlier Parkview meetings about educational grants. So, Paul, I'll ask you to start us off with your thoughts, and then others on the panel are welcome to jump in.
Well, thank you. What a gift it was to be here with your congregation this morning, and it's nice to look out and see many friendly faces that are very familiar. And as mentioned, and as you know, Parkview is a partnering congregation with Eastern Mennonite School. The definition of that from the school's perspective is that you include your students at 50, as part of your missional work at Eastern Mennonite School, 50% of their partner tuition. And partner churches also, the school partners in making that lower tuition rate kindergarten through grade 12, so long as your congregation is partnering at that 50% or greater level, somewhere in that divisional range of K to 5 or 6 to 8 or 9 to 12. Well, you know, when I think of the work of Eastern Mennonite School, it's very sacred work. It is work that affects mind, body, soul, spirit, from kindergarten through grade 12 at Eastern Mennonite School. And our mission speaks to that. We always point back to our mission and vision, and just several things that I would say are part of our faith ecosystem is Jesus is at the center. We care about academics and what we teach, personal integrity, and helping our students grow into honest, forthright, open people, and this sense of service of living beyond ourselves is key. Pointing all of our students to being agents that make the world a better place and point people to Jesus. Our vision also kind of gets at some of this, and our board is doing hard work in kind of drafting, rewriting as part of an upcoming accreditation, our vision and mission work. But our vision talks about making sure every student belongs, because before someone, and then talks about thriving and then joining God's work in the world, because before anyone can thrive, they first have to have a sense of belonging. And then before they can really join God's work in the world, they have to be able to do more than be at that survival level, but thriving as individuals or working with a sense of confidence, you know, confidence in who we are and how we join in with other people is what allows God's work to be seen. And we try to do that through our curriculum, but some of the other questions that you get at regarding identity or book selection that's in our libraries, all of those we point back to our vision and mission of how are they helping us work. And I would say one other frame that is pretty important in K-12 education, we're not about perfection. We welcome and expect a growth mindset of everyone, from the employees to the students. We welcome risk, trying things. I love what Joy Anderson, who I believe maybe is part of this congregation, says at every music program, mistakes are beautiful. Because when we make mistakes, that's when we learn. And so we try to create this environment of learning that welcomes risks, that welcomes mistakes, and that we are going to stick with one another through the imperfections and grow in that. So one of the things that I did this morning at the kitchen table was I started with Voices Together, and I just was looking, okay, which of these songs kind of connect who we are? And if you're bored, I encourage you to just start. I went through the first 30 songs, and every one almost just spoke to who we aim to be at EMS. So I encourage you to just kind of take a look through those songs. I only went through 30, but that hymn book resonates with who we aim to be as a school. I don't know if that gets enough. This partnership between home and church is maybe a confusing thing. Historically, that was a connection through Virginia Mennonite Conference that included governance. It developed these partner congregations having part of their budget, part of their missional budget, faith formation at EMS, and we're so grateful for that. It has allowed the school to do more than survive, but has allowed us to thrive. It includes pastors and church staff being part of chapel. When we have significant crisis and tragedies within our community, it has often involved church leadership helping to respond through counseling. We allows us, when we do community service, to connect with friends, for students to grow in serving through shared facilities and vehicles. Those are some of the ways that we aim to partner. But it is a bit of a confusing thing. It sometimes feels transactional because we link money to that. And I would much rather have our partnership be one of, that is not a transactional sense, because transactional gets to questions of divisiveness, because it's how we spend our money, and money seems to be a divisive thing. And we really want to work within the spirit of faith formation, because that's why we exist. And I hope we can think of our partnership beyond the transactional. I think there's a lot of meaningful relationships that happen between EMS and church communities. And I know that certainly makes us a stronger school that really has the home, the school, and the church working together. As Mr. King often says, you know, when 5 significant adults are involved in the life of a young person, it really helps shape their trajectory for life. And I hope that one of the ways that our partnership lives out its life is that there are meaningful adults in your congregation, meaningful adults in the school, that really shape the life trajectory forever of our students. I'm going to pass the mic before
Yes. Others on the council, on
I
the
speak too much.
panel?
I just wanted to first of all say thank you for having this conversation and for inviting us to be a part of that with you. We respect that these discussions are challenging at a congregational level when budget information is relevant, but we just appreciate that this is a dialogue and that you've taken the time to ask good questions, so thank you. My husband Steve and I have 2 girls who attended EMS. We're now empty nesters. Our youngest daughter graduated last year with Miriam. So we had the experience of being parents for 8 years for each of them through middle and high school. And I would say to this idea of partnership that before coming on the board, before all of this, you know, this financial piece of partnership was not something I understood, but the idea that I could bring my soon-to-be teenage children into an environment where the teachers were going to be working alongside me and raising, you know, responsible, faithful children was reassuring to me. So this partnership wasn't ever something that I really expected to be super concrete. It was just more of like, oh, thank goodness, we're not alone in this. We have some other people alongside us. So it's a little bit more nebulous and yet a strong feeling of connection. You asked what are ways that your congregation might partner with EMS, and you already do that so well. You know, certainly through supporting your students and coming tuition-wise, but you know, we see you at drama performances, we see you at concerts, we see you at sporting events. You know, so you're partnering with us in 1,000 different ways already, and we hope that you'll continue to do that. You know, I think with the scholarship program that you've had for your own children here, you know, there are other scholarship programs at the school. There are other financial pieces that we have, but I would just encourage you to continue connecting on all the different ways. Supporting your members who are teachers would be another way.
Thank you. Maybe one more panel comment?
Yeah, I'll just share real quickly here is from a teacher's perspective. One of the things that I think about when we talk about partnering with home and church, especially with the home piece of it, I teach a film studies class, which at times can provide the opportunity to show films that aren't comfortable for some families. And so one of the things that I do in that class is always send out information to parents about what we're going to be doing in class and being receptive to feedback about that and even adapting sort of what I'm doing in class based on parental comfort level. And I know the same thing happens. I'm a parent as well. I have 3 students, 1 in each division. And I know that happened with the 10th grade class this year with some reading choices that they had. So that's one of the ways that we as teachers work at that, is that we are aware that we have a wide range of sort of comfort level and perspectives coming from the home. And we're not here as teachers trying to say, this is where you need to be, but rather we're listening to what the home is comfortable with. And then part of my role is also Bible department chair, and I want to just be honest that sort of this partnership with church is one that I'm still figuring out. This is my 2nd year, and I think historically when Virginia Mennonite Conference would have had a youth minister and other sort of more structural ways of connecting to the school, that some of those things were more structured and more intentional. And it's one of those pieces that I'm trying to figure out in terms of how we partner with our local congregations, so that we're not doing overlap with what maybe youth ministries in different congregations are doing. But broadly, I see that we're supplementing what churches are able to do. I have the privileges of being able to have 9th graders for 1 trimester every day. And that's a lot of content that I'm able to provide that supplements what our congregation is able to do on Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings, and what other congregations are able to do through their instruction. So part of where our partnership is just trying to continue in the faith formation and add another piece to what the congregations and what the home is already doing.
All right. We're going to open it up now to you and the congregation. If you have further comments or questions for the panel, we can have a little dialogue.
I don't have a question, but a comment, and I want to express my appreciation to the school, and I have some basis on which to express that appreciation. Years ago, I had a daughter and a son graduate from there. I have had 3 grandchildren graduate from there, and 3 more that are on their way. So I've had some really blessed connections. One time in particular that I was really grateful, my son and daughter was there. I think it was back in '91, the first Iraq war, and you remember the level of patriotism and nationalism. And I was wondering at the time what my children would have faced in a public school, and I would have had concerns about that. They were at EMHS, and I was so glad they were there where I could trust how what was happening would be interpreted.
Thank you. I think we'll move on now to the next closely linked set of questions. The following from a member of the congregation is, I think, more a critique of private Christian education than a question about EMHS, but it relates to what we've just been talking about, to the partnership. So any of you are welcome to respond. It is a privilege to attend EMHS. Students can study within the Anabaptist cocoon of family, church, and school with teachers and mentors who can help them grow in their faith. Education includes awareness of injustice, poverty, and other needs in the world, and students' responsibility to address these issues. My question is, what happens to public schools when we remove these students and their parents from them, along with possible federal or state funding? If we are to be a light to the world, shall we hide away in our safe, entitled enclaves? Is this what we want to teach our high school students? Should this be our congregation's mission? So panel, open it to you.
I think that one way that EMHS continues to be a light to the world while also being a private institution is the emphasis that it has on service to the community. Students at EMHS have many opportunities to participate in community service. Some examples of that are there's a service club, We Serve, which is really active in the community, as well as class service days and community service day where students can sign up to participate in a service project. And I think that EMHS's emphasis on service is a really important part of how EMHS gives back to the community and shares its light.
This congregation does an incredible job at supporting the Anabaptist Mennonite faith ecosystem. I look out across this congregation and I recognize so many of you, and I know so many of you well. A couple years ago, my uncle passed away, Paul Longacre, and I was at his funeral at Community Mennonite, and I was looking out across kind of a sea of gray and white hair of pillars of the Mennonite church, not unlike the group of you that are here. And at the time, I was teaching history at East Rockingham High School, and I was coaching baseball there. And the thought just crossed my mind, like, what's going to happen when all these people die? I mean, people who started like incredible programs like MVS and gave their lives to work overseas, sustained institutions like MCC and MDS. And I was teaching in a public school and attending Zion Mennonite, where I'm currently a member, and that question just kind of like haunted me. Our Mennonite churches are good at a lot of things, but I think our young people, and myself included, they can't help but also notice we're good at ripping ourselves apart. And I believe with like all my heart in a healthy faith ecosystem, right? One that includes primary and secondary schools, ones that includes colleges, ones that includes adult degree completion programs, one that includes programs for retirees to volunteer somewhere warm in the summer to build a house for somebody in need. One that, right, you could list them. We have this beautiful Mennonite ecosystem, and we believe in it passionately because of the way we read Scripture. And how are we going to benefit this ecosystem? It's going to be together. It's going to be pulling together. It doesn't mean that someone has to go to a Mennonite school, K through 12. I didn't. But it has to have opportunities along the way for people where it's right for them at that time in their life. Mass education, as I was a part of it, is doing its best. And there isn't a teacher right now that you could talk to who would say, yeah, things are great. This is the hardest time ever to be a teacher. It's the hardest time ever to be a high school student. And there's never been a more relevant time for an Anabaptist Mennonite education. And that doesn't mean it has to be right for you at that moment in your life. It wasn't for me. I attended Akron Mennonite Church at the time. It was thriving. I had mentors. I had a strong family system. But I knew that I wanted to go to college somewhere that had friends more like my youth group at church. And that brought me to EMU. Those experiences planted seeds in me. And that's what this congregation is in the business of doing. Nathan Hirschberger, one of our Bible teachers, wrote about that in Anabaptist Witness. We're in the business of planting seeds. Parkview does it, Community does it, Zion does it, all sorts of other faith-based institutions do it, and I think our futures are intricately linked. It's not binary. If we want to just see faith ecosystems be healthy, we have to continue to ask questions like that. How do we partner together? To define the relationship, to have the DTR, as kids say. To be able to really reflect together, how are things going? What can we do better? What can I do differently? That's essential for every conversation that you're going to have. And I'm grateful to be here this morning because, as you can tell, I care passionately about my school, our school, about Anabaptist Mennonite interpretations and how relevant and practical I think they are to the world around us. And I think that our students and our young people are really primed and looking for answers to the fact that they look around them and they see that things aren't really, all roses. And so whatever this congregation, whatever other congregations can do that can help support a healthy Anabaptist Mennonite faith ecosystem, I think we're better together. A couple ways we're doing that at EMHS, I'll just mention, we're partnering with Mennonite Disaster Service right now for our students in their shop class. They're learning how to build a house for somebody that is going to go down to Hurley, Virginia. Our E-terms are participating with Mennonite Mission Network, who did a civil rights tour. I mean, I could go on and list some of these things, but I think the ways that we can continue to support one another is the answer to that question that I was asking at my uncle's funeral.
I thought I had words, and then I don't after that, Justin. So what I will say is this. I'm new to the board at EMS. I think I'm finishing up my first year. I have 2 children who attend public school, and that was the choice that we wanted to make for our family. To be completely honest with y'all, I pastored all of my kids' life before we moved here, and they said, please, Mommy, let us not do Mennonite all day long. And so we had some important conversations about what it meant for them to engage differently in the world. What I will say, thank you so much, Justin, Paul, Ben, there's several other folks who work at EMS. I'm on the board at EMS because I believe in the importance of faith formation as it's happening from leaders like you all. It is not incongruent in me that my children attend public education, and I believe strongly in what is happening in that space, and I know it to be important, and I know it to be vital for the students who come in and out of that building. And so I'll just try to underline and not even add anything to what you said by saying the leadership that students are able to soak in is incredibly important. And though I make multiple decisions, it's perfectly spoken as you offered it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing some of the benefits of this education as well as the nature of the choice our students and families have in making it. I think I'd like to go now to the congregation. Do you have other comments or questions?
I'm wondering if the financial kind of, Paul, you mentioned transaction between public school and private school could be explained just a little bit more. I heard that maybe as part of a comment that was read, and I understand that there are some differences here in the state of Virginia that are particular to how the state government runs its school funding than, for instance, in Pennsylvania, where I grew up in Mennonite education. So I'm just wondering if there would be a response, a little more information that could be provided there. Thank you.
Yeah, and do you mind if I just jump back to one statement that was made that's very true, and it started out, it is a privilege to attend Eastern Mennonite School. Absolutely, it is a privilege. In fact, I am a very privileged person, and I would imagine the majority of us in this room are highly privileged people. And we often talk about the negative side of privilege, or we bring up privilege as maybe a negative thing. And I guess I would say it's a wonderful gift, but it's a gift. It's a gift that we have. And it's a gift that needs to be shared. It's an add-on of our responsibility. It's a capacity that we have that we need to share to make the world a better place. And I think when we start thinking bad about privilege, it's because we're not maximizing maybe the privilege that we have, or we're being too selfish with it. And I would say the students at EMS learn a lot about the privilege they have. And I hope they take with them the added responsibility, the added capacity to make the world a better place. And I see that happening time and again through our alumni who have gone through that place. and through people in this room because you take that responsibility seriously. And so I didn't want to ignore that, yes, it is a privileged world in which we live. And I hope our students see that more than others that are their peers. To your question, Sarah, just a real quick 101 on educational finance. If you look at local budgets, or if you pay your city taxes, which you probably do, the majority of our local taxes, property taxes, go to education. And then another significant portion come from the state sales taxes that you pay. And maybe 5 to 10% of local education has federal funded support through federal programs, title programs, a lot of your special education type programs. So that's kind of how public education would be funded. Let's just say 45% local, 45% state, 10% federal. Would be pretty close. And the question was, so what does a private school do to that educational situation? I remember it was my first year at EMS, 2003, and a community member said, Paul, you need to rally all the private schools together and say on August 1, we're not opening our doors, and see what the state does. That would be thousands upon students, thousand upon thousand students, I don't know how many it would be, that the state would need to fund with the same amount of dollars. So in essence, private education financially subsidizes public education. Homeschooling subsidizes public education. If those tens of thousands were suddenly in the public education system, we would scramble for building more buildings, for hiring more staff, and your taxes would go up significantly to fund those. They would have to. There's no other way about it. The state, and this is not Virginia, Virginia's kind of slow in this regard, but many states are starting to realize, I think, that private education and parental choice and family investment in their education is an important thing. And so many states have started tax credit programs or voucher systems that do not impact local funds, but they do impact state funds some. And so in Virginia, for example, the Education Improvement Scholarship Tax Credit Program, long name, gives people 65% return on their state taxes if they contribute that to a private school who admits students within 300% of the federal poverty line. So it's a way to honor families who could not afford to be at EMS. It's a cost savings because they're not giving 100% of that tax back. They're giving less than what they would spend on education. But it's allowing more students to be part of private Christian or other faith-based or secular education who otherwise could not be there. Schools still need to help because the amount the state gives cannot fully fund education. It only funds like 45% in public education. It cannot fund 100%. You know, that would be an interesting conversation to figure out how do congregations work together with schools to make it possible for other children who are outside of your congregation to attend. I would say one of the things that we as independent congregations forget when you're a partnering congregation, you're really freeing the school's other tuition dollars to be shared as financial aid beyond your congregation to families who otherwise can't be there. So a partnership program is doing so much more than making it possible for your students to be there. It's making it possible for many other students who want a Christian Anabaptist education to be there, who otherwise would have no chance.
Thank you so much for that clarification. I think that's very helpful. I'm going to move us forward. Hang on to other questions or comments you have, and we'll see if we have time at the end. The next couple of questions that are pretty closely related. How does EMS address issues of sexual identity? EMS has a non-discrimination statement on its website. This statement does not specifically include non-discrimination based on sexuality. Do LGBTQ or non-binary students experience acceptance in the classroom, in chapels, in the hallways? How is this topic being discussed? And about gender dysphoria, how is it being handled? My granddaughter wants to be called they, them, has changed her name. She seems happy at EMS. So, panel?
Hot potato.
Okay. No, it's okay. So I was able to talk to some of my friends from EMHS that are a part of the LGBTQ plus community to hopefully be able to respond to this question more accurately. It seemed like the general consensus was that EMHS felt like a safe and generally accepting community, but it felt like to my friends that conversations about the LGBTQ community and non-binary individuals was rarely talked about. That can make students feel uncomfortable at times as well if they are a part of that community. Some friends felt like they needed to hide parts of their identity while at school. In general, LGBTQ plus topics weren't discussed, and one friend even mentioned several instances when conversations about LGBTQ plus issues were discussed, the conversations were quickly silenced when middle school students entered the room. This makes me curious about how LGBTQ plus youth in middle school feel about EMS in terms of gender and sexuality acceptance, since it seems like conversations regarding identity are even less present in middle school. I think another really important topic to think about is how LGBTQ plus issues are discussed in terms of Christianity. While my friends and I attended EMS, some teachers would be open about their opinions about LGBTQ plus identities being sinful. This could make it feel like queer people aren't welcome in Christianity. One of my friends mentioned that, to her knowledge, there has never been a queer chapel speaker that spoke on a religious subject. I think it's important to make LGBTQ plus topics more present in conversations rather than shying away from them. I think it could be really powerful to have a queer Christian person talk about their faith in chapel, and therefore include a group of people in the Christian conversation who have been previously directly or indirectly been told that their identity doesn't have a place in Christianity. That being said, it is also evident to students and that teachers care deeply about them at EMS and strive to make EMS a welcoming and inclusive community.
Well, Miriam, I think that was excellently stated and very accurate reflection of what probably happens at EMS, and is certainly what you have experienced. This topic is very and deeply personal, where there hasn't been resolution in the church for the last 2,000 plus years. And I'm not sure that we'll find resolution within the church in the next number of years. And so it's really a challenging topic for us because it is so deeply personal through friends, through family, through acquaintances, through wanting to live like Jesus and welcome and make sure everyone belongs. It is why belonging is a key word in our vision statement. And yet we know it's a hot topic. It's a divisive one. And so we don't talk about it a whole lot. We do prioritize our mission and vision, and it's not listed there, though it is certainly something that internally we have conversations from time to time and are deeply committed to partnering with any parent, any family structure, and any family system to where we can be supportive and loving and doing what is required for that student, that family, to belong part of our community. We don't see it as a salvation issue, it's more of a human issue. And I would say, this is Paul's personal perspective, so. I would say focus on personal identity, whether you're a basketball player, an academic student, take whatever your gift is and it becomes kind of who you're known for. Your profession, when we focus on our personal identity, and I love how this ties into Phil's message this morning. We're focused at the wrong place, people. Our focus needs to be on Christ's identity and being Jesus to one another and looking beyond ourselves to what do those around us need and how can we join in and make that a more heavenly, safe place for that individual and those people. I think there's probably a reason Jesus wasn't too institutional. Institutions cause policy, cause protection, and Jesus was able to break those barriers. And I hope we can do that at EMS on a personal level, one by one.
One more panel comment.
Yeah. And I would also just say, Miriam, I really appreciate you sharing like previous student perspectives. And then I would also just name that there are a group of teachers who do have some more familiarity with topics of gender and sexuality and are more and more comfortable talking about those. There's a number of us who use our pronouns on our email signatures and have them on our classroom doors. And so I think that there are definitely faculty who understand these issues well, maybe more so than what some other faculty have done with some recent turnover, especially in the Bible department. And we're bringing in outside resource speakers in our 12th grade classes to talk about some of these topics around gender and sexuality. And students who need to find a safe space within school know who those faculty are. I think there's also a lot of student support that happens, sort of outside of those institutional structures that maybe Paul talked about, that I think there is a way that students are feeling comfortable to find those spaces where they need them. As a Bible teacher, this topic does come up, and I'm willing to engage with it and sort of hear where students are at. I've had students share their own sexuality in my class as we're talking about Romans 1 in the past 2 weeks. And so, yeah, it's something that I'm comfortable doing. I know that not all teachers are, and so student experiences differ within each classroom there.
Thank you. Congregation, comments or questions?
So I'm wondering if this philosophy, that's this way of handling things at EMS, is keeping people who have very much more conservative views about this away from the school. Or if they do come into the school, how much influence do they have? Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Does anyone on the panel have a thought about that?
Okay. I guess I'm speaking for the school. I would say, as a general reflection, the school has, both on faculty, staff, and within the parent community, a wide spectrum that goes from fairly conservative to fairly progressive. And on the board. Yeah, in fact, we kind of had this conversation at the board level and realized we're a really good reflection of who we are as a school community on the board at the governance level. And I would say, at least people who come to me and feel the least safe at sharing their perspective would be our conservative, on the conservative end of our brothers and sisters, would be the ones who feel the least comfortable in sharing their perspective. I don't know if that answers your question. But.
What kind of influence does that have on the board board and the direction, what kind of influence does that then have on the board and the direction that the school really wants to take for being open and welcoming, I guess I'm saying? Does it have any influence? You try to be all things to all people, basically?
We do try to be a place that's safe for all people. And, you know, those would range from other faith traditions to, you know, denominational perspective, to Mennonite perspective.
In this morning's message, at the very end, I took a couple of notes. And I think it was that Phil said that we're living out lives. Our goal should be living out lives of faith, building relationships, living with people, and saying we're just like you. And that resonated with me as we think about this. The other part I didn't get the note down was something along the lines of, we're going to work out these issues together. And so this is one of those places where I think within the school at a faculty level, and certainly on a student level, and also on a board level, we don't all agree on this. And it's messy. And you know it's messy, because I think you have a statement on your church website that alludes, it's a beautiful statement, but just this idea that we recognize that we're going to disagree on some things, and how can we keep going forward and keeping sight of the main goal, which is to follow and live lives like Christ. And so I'm not sure that, you know, this idea, are we trying to be all things to all people? I don't quite know how to answer that. I think we're trying to express love and genuineness in living out our faith as best we can, and being honest when we have disagreements.
Thank you, and it occurs to me that this kind of dialogue is one way a church-school partnership can move some of these issues forward for discussion at the school level, perhaps, as well. We do have quite some more to cover, so I'll keep moving. How does EMS address the following national issues? Many schools in Virginia and elsewhere are experiencing pressure from parents and outside groups to ban books from school libraries or censure topics such as race and sexuality. Has EMS been weeding or otherwise eliminating books from its libraries that deal with sexuality or race issues? How and by whom are library books evaluated? How are outside pressures handled?
So we do have a library policy when we have a parent who has a particular concern, maybe about a book that's in the library. We've updated that policy each of the last 3 summers, anticipating, you know, that something like that may come up. I think this is my 5th year as principal, and I've had a conversation about a book a parent was concerned about that I can recall right now off the top of my head one time. So it's not something that we're hearing a whole lot of. I think as a school we do try to really lean into issues that are relevant and practical for our students. I believe that an education that's relevant and practical is best practice. And so our library would represent those resources as well. So that's in specific regards to kind of the library. But we have an incredibly diverse set of books and materials and resources there.
It's actually one of my favorite policies. It's called Navigating Controversial Issues, so it's broader than the library. But I would be happy to share it with the congregation on what it states specifically.
Thank you. Has the congregation had a chance to respond here? I'm getting myself confused. Yeah, does anyone in the congregation have a response or a thought? Irvin?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I caught all of what you were saying, Paul, about like the policy. Do you actually have a written policy on what kind of books you collect, for example, or have in the collection?
Let me read maybe a couple of the opening statements in this policy.
We do have a specific library policy, and we have a policy on navigating controversial issues, and those are separate, but they complement each other.
Would
Speaking
Would it be possible, for sake of time, for you to send those to us, and we could then provide them for the congregation?
Yeah.
Would that be satisfactory, Irvin? Okay, thank you. The next question is, does EMS have a stance on Christian nationalism?
Well, I would say yes, and that we do not promote nationalism. We promote globalism, and that God is the God of all peoples, of all places on the earth. Naturally, as a historic peace church, we do not play the national anthem. Our American flag is in line with all the other flags that represent students who have attended EMS. Recently, we had a very powerful chapel that the kids were riveted, I think maybe actually from a member in your congregation, on war tax and whether, how they go about conscientiously paying their taxes and which portions they don't. We condemn violence and those who seek to use positions of power to condone and promote violence, which we see pretty heavily involved in nationalism in our country. So I would say our policy is we do not promote nationalism.
Thank you. Congregation? Lauren, here in the front.
Just a historical comment, and Paul, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was right after 9/11 when the impetus started to develop a new Bible curriculum among the EMHS schools, and that was a direct, as I recall, a direct response to the question of nationalism after 9/11, partly because some of the Mennonite schools were less committed to Anabaptism than others. And to the chagrin of a bunch of administrators, they discovered there were a bunch of faculty members in some of the other schools who wanted to put flags around their windows, offices, etc., and could not understand the perspective that EMSEC was trying to inculcate. So I would just say that that was an example of the Mennonite schools collectively saying, this is an issue, and now let's do, from a curricular perspective, a response to that to help counter the impetus toward national. And I think we've seen more impetus toward nationalism since then, politically, across the country. So it's even more important now, in my judgment.
Thank you. I'm going to move us along to the final question. We have just a little more than 10 minutes, and it's probably the most important one of our questions. So, what does it mean to be an Anabaptist institution, especially as your student demographics become more diverse? What makes EMS Anabaptist? How is Anabaptism seen, felt, and understood by teachers, administration, and students? Do most faculty espouse Christian Anabaptism? With a few Christian schools in our area, what makes EMS distinctive in its faith and philosophy of education? What required and elective courses in Bible and religion are offered? And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. We have, they've graciously provided a lot of materials about that. What is the value added by EMHS to what is taught and learned about faith at church and home that is unique or complementary? So these are pretty closely related questions. And thank you, panel.
Yeah, so I think that Bible classes and chapel services are where EMS's Anabaptist beliefs are most clearly communicated. When I was thinking about this question, I realized I wouldn't be surprised, though, if there were many students at EMS who don't know what an Anabaptist is or even what a Mennonite is. I think that it's important to have conversations about why values such as pacifism and community are held so close to the Mennonite tradition, although I also recognize that it can be difficult to hold on to Anabaptist culture and make it more present in school while also being a welcoming environment to students with different backgrounds. While it seems that Anabaptism is a big part of the lives and inspiration of many of the teachers at EMS, I think that teaching Anabaptist values is something that can get pretty complicated. During my time at EMS, I observed that some teachers attempted to teach their Anabaptist beliefs. While I understand that EMS is an Anabaptist school and is therefore important that Anabaptist values are taught, it gets complicated when teachers are teaching their interpretations of the Bible and how to put Anabaptist values into practice, rather than teaching the values in a broad sense and leaving them to the interpretations of the students. In the past, I've seen how the interpretations of biblical values from teachers has made certain groups of students feel as though they are unable to be a part of Christianity or the Anabaptist tradition because their identity or personal values don't align with the interpretations of the Bible that are being taught by their teachers. And that being said, also, I think that's something that EMS continues to move in a positive direction with. And something that I observed that made EMS unique in its Christian education and gave its students an opportunity to openly explore their faith was the Kingdom Living class that students take during their senior year that Ben and Karen Suderman teach. This class gave students an opportunity to ask challenging questions about their faith, and it felt like a safe space for discussion and exploration within faith-based topics. We were encouraged to learn more about ourselves and our faith throughout this course as we prepared our senior presentations. And I had an amazing experience at EMHS, and I want to make that really clear as well. A couple of things that I think made EMHS really unique is the emphasis on service and community. Service, as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of opportunities for that at EMHS. EMHS also has a close sense of community, which makes me feel cared for even after I've left the school, which is something that I think is really special about EMHS. I think Justin King knows the name of every person in the high school, which I find very impressive, and makes an effort to make personal connections with people through quick chats in the hallways and smiles as you enter the building in the morning. Neighbor groups are groups that meet once a week to discuss topics from chapel services and just hang out. Neighbor groups were a great way to get to know students that you might not normally talk to and placed additional emphasis on EMHS's value of community.
I'd really like to use most of our time here to hear from the panel, so I welcome other comments.
So again, Miriam, I really appreciate you sharing your perspectives. And as chair of the Bible department, we have 4 new Bible teachers who are all new last year was my first year, and so grades 7 through 12 have an entirely new Bible department, and our philosophy is very, very different. We are looking to, as we understand Anabaptist faith, we are looking to create a critical faith in the sense that students are free to ask critical questions. So one thing Karen and I did last year in Kingdom Living was, maybe not every Friday, but a lot of Fridays we did what we called Free Friday, where students bring questions that they want to discuss. And it's about questions that they have rather than us dispensing answers. And to me, that's part of what Anabaptism is. It's this communal discernment. It's about all of us bringing our own lived experiences and putting them on the table and figuring out how we relate to each other among those lived experiences. And so even in my 9th grade Bible class, I tell the students all the time, your tests are going to be a little bit harder or different than you're used to because I'm not going to tell you I want the right answer. I'm going to ask you to take a piece of scripture and tell me what you think it means. And so that's really the approach that we're trying to model in our Bible department, which I think is a true reflection of Anabaptism, where faith has to be owned. It's not something that you just take from somebody else. It's something that you choose to make your own. And again, that would be one of the questions, was about sort of a distinctive that EMS offers compared to other Christian schools. And my assumption would be, and this is somewhat from experiences of other students coming into our school from that have done previous grades at other schools, is that we're not about, for lack of a more nuanced term, indoctrinating students. We're about sort of providing them with an overview of what faith formation is and what the Christian tradition is and what the Bible is, and letting them make choices about what they believe and where they are in that whole range. And so we don't view faith as sort of a progression where you move from here to here to here. But we've used this term of ecosystem, where it's the family, the church, and the home. And all of these things contribute to students, and they may take a very winding journey. And some of them are going to be ready at 8th grade to make a profession of faith. And some of them may be in 12th grade. And some of them may be at age 30. And we're holding that very lightly and giving them opportunities to grow, rather than saying this is where you need to be at these stages and these stages and these stages as you move through. So that's sort of the approach that our Bible department is taking now, that I would hope reflects sort of this Anabaptist idea of a lived, owned faith. I think there was one. Oh, the other thing I would just name in terms of where we're Anabaptist, I would just name that we connect with a lot of different Mennonite agencies and institutions. So I led an e-term course to Mennonite Disaster Service. I think, Justin, you mentioned that we do things with Mennonite Mission Network. We had Mennonite Mission Networks talk about their service adventure program in our Kingdom Living classes and in our Bible 9 classes. And so we're constantly, the Mennonite schools are always in our school. And so they also get exposure to Mennonite experiences through all these different Mennonite agencies in our building.
I'm really trying to wrap my head around what all I would say to this question, because there would be a lot. And I'm remembering a time when my older daughter was not doing well in a biology class, and we had asked for a parent meeting, being good parents, and we went into the school, and we were concerned about grades because we're type A parents also, and we sat down with Lee Good, who's lovely, and he started us out in prayer. And he should have, because that was what EMS does, and it was beautiful, and she survived biology, and so did we. And I remember the time that my younger daughter, Kate, was on the e-term to New Mexico, and they learned about earth houses and taking care of environment, and they learned about spirituality, and they hiked in the wilderness, and she spent hours with a journal. And all of this came, and it makes me a little teary because I think it was her very favorite experience in high school, and she still talks about that, but it brought together this idea of community on a trip, this idea of learning about the world and the beauty of the creation, and the spirituality of being totally by yourself and in communication with God. And it was life-changing for her. And so when I think about, this question of what does it mean to be an Anabaptist institution, especially as your student demographics become more diverse, oh my gosh, like that is it. That is where the rubber hits the road. You know, when my daughter came home and she said, "Mom, you've got to watch this chapel." And it was the young man from South Africa who came and he taught the group about Ubuntu, and she watched it again with me, and we watched it together. Like, when the community becomes more diverse, then people who didn't know anything about Anabaptist values now know them. And we have more people going out into the world who understand circle times and restorative justice and peace, and that our lives are worth more than the things that we would call sin. So I would argue to you that if we support an Anabaptist institution like EMS and we become diverse, we're not losing, we're winning.
I just want to add 2 sentences to that, and before Justin goes, because I learned the last time. Anabaptist education broadly is reminding us that God is doing something important and necessary in the world, and we want to be able to form our whole selves, our minds, our bodies, our spirits, into the ways where we can notice what God is doing in the world. And EMS, what makes EMS distinctive is that there are people and spaces and experiences and practices that are helping that to happen in really important ways. And when we think about expanding who gets to do that, it hits me as a person who joined the Mennonite world later in my life, and I I show up differently, and I want to believe that that what we get to do is to bring more people into the ways we are finding God in the world, and giving us the tools to do it in the ways that we know to be true through Anabaptist values. And so it's an amazing opportunity, and the possibilities of that are amazing. And this is what we want to be doing in the world as we are hearing God call us into that. So sorry.
Amen.
Justin, final comment.
I just wanted to invite you guys to come to school. One of my favorite things is getting to give tours. We often have alumni come back, and I love connecting with them. We have guests in the building all the time, and I love to take them into, and we have a very unique culture in a lot of different ways, but our students are so used to me walking around the halls and being in and out of classrooms with someone that it's not even a thing. So I just wanted to invite you guys, please come to school. Email me anytime. And our coffee's not that great, but our tour is really good. And I would love to welcome you and to get you into some classrooms. You know, if you're like, hey, I want to sit in on what Mr. Bixler's doing. I want to sit in on what Nathan Hirschberger is doing. I want to sit in on what Karen Suderman is doing as they're in their Bible classes. Guys, we have some incredible faculty, but our Bible faculty, they're phenomenal. I want you in those classrooms as a guest, as someone in the back. If there's a particular content area that you like, if there's someone that you want to meet. So I just want to welcome you into our space and to get to know us. It's one of the things I like to do the most.
Our time is up, so let's thank this panel for their powerful words. Thank you so much. And Paul, you do have a final word?
Just thank you so much for the opportunity. I wish every congregation did this. We need to be in conversations. We need to do this together. Thank you.
And now we would like to give a blessing for the panel. So Joe and Carissa.
Just express my thanks as well. As I listen to the panel, two of the values that come to mind to me are a sense of both conviction and humility as I listen to the school leadership. I think that's embodied in this group here, a clear sense of who we are, but also humility, a willingness to grow and to listen just by virtue of you being here today. So thank you very much.
And I'll quickly say as well, I was in the place of the one person asking a question of, we have a responsibility for all the public school students as well as our own children. And your response, just with privilege comes responsibility. That's how we made the decision for our three older ones to come to EMS, was feeling like they needed a place of real safety and belonging. And that's what we really have felt at EMS, and I feel like they can go out and be a light for the world in a different way. So thank you for bringing this discussion to us and for all that you're doing at EMS.
We'd like to say a blessing for you, some words from the Irish poet John O'Donohue, as well as some words from Voices Together. So I'm going to ask the congregation just to extend your arms as we read these words. And I would also ask, I see just a couple of current staff members at EMS. If you're a staff member, stand, and the congregation can also extend their hands to you. Okay? May the gift of school leadership stir in you as a vocation and keep you mindful of the providence that calls you to serve.
As high over the mountains the eagle spreads its wings, may your perspective be larger than the view from the foothills.
And when the way is flat and dull in times of gray endurance, may your imagination continue to evoke horizons.
When thirst burns in times of drought, may you be blessed to find the wells.
And may you have the wisdom to read time clearly and know when the seed of change will flourish.
In your heart, may there be a sanctuary for the stillness where clarity is born.
May your work be infused with passion and creativity and have the wisdom to balance compassion and challenge.
May your soul find the graciousness to rise above the fester of small mediocrities. May your power never become a shell wherein your heart would silently atrophy. May you welcome your own vulnerability as the ground where healing and truth join. May integrity of soul be your first ideal, the source that will guide and bless your work.
And go knowing that you are beloved by God and by the community you serve. And may the peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God. And may the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be with you always. Amen.
We're adjourned.